Welcome to Down the Garden Path. I'm your host, Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and plant lover. I enjoy discussing down to earth tips and advice to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. And I also aim to bring you interesting and relevant topics to educate you all about the landscaping and horticultural industry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Down the Garden Path. I love it when you join me here, and I'm really excited about my topic and my guest. I want to introduce you to Amy Ellard-Gray. She is the Home Hobby Homestead in the suburbs of Guelph, and she grows 75% of her family's fruit and vegetables in her backyard, along with 100 varieties of native plants to help repair the ecosystem. And we have a lot to talk about. I reached out to Amy to talk about soil and soil testing. And so we're going to talk about that as well as a few other things. So welcome to the show, Amy.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I love, and you have the YouTube channel, so everything will be in the show notes. But I wanted everyone to know that you have put a lot of information there on your YouTube channel about your hobby homestead. So tell me a little bit about, we talked before the show about what a homestead is to you and what you have going on.
I am growing food for my family in the suburbs. So yeah, I'm in Guelph, just outside of Toronto. And my family is getting about 75% of our food, our fruit and vegetables from our garden space. And I consider that really, really good for like a
Hmm.
suburban space. And it just feels really nice to be able to have everything homegrown, to know what's in the food, to know relatively that it's going to be nutritious because it's just been harvested and enjoyed fresh. And also, I think I would probably be growing 100% of our fruit and vegetables if I didn't have little kids, but they're a little bit pickier. And so we buy fresh peppers and cucumbers and things through the winter, and that's the difference there.
Yes. Excellent. How old are the kids?
4 and 9.
Ah, okay. Okay. So 9-year-old's probably getting into it a bit too. And I think it's great because when I envisioned, you must have acres and acres and acres of property, right? And so I love the idea of a suburban homestead to know that you can grow food. And I think so many people are, so many of my clients are. I'm trying to grow some food. I have a very small space for that, but I still want to be successful. And I think that's the best way I think for people to kind of catch the bug, right? Is success, being successful. So I think
Absolutely,
that's
yeah.
really, I think 75% is wonderful.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a like overly passionate gardener, and so every year I take away a little bit more lawn from my kids and make a little bit more garden space. We grow in raised beds, and we
Yes.
also have a food forest system. So just converted lawn into a forest floor type of soil through sheet mulching with cardboard and then wood chips. And so we've got fruit trees there and berry bushes and mushrooms and lots of native plants for the pollinators and just for
Yeah.
the betterment of the ecosystem in general. And so especially that like in-ground garden, it's really easy to have it creep further and further out into the lawn space every year. I take over more space every year.
Yes. Yeah, what the husbands don't notice, we don't have to point out to them. That's how I start my garden is all in my front yard. And that's how I started my ornamental garden was with the compost and the mulch or the cardboard and the mulch and kind of,
Mhm.
and then every year, like, I'm just edging and edging. I've kind of got to, I've got to stop where I am now, but I know what you mean. So whether you're doing that method for food or for ornamental, it's a pretty good way to do it. So
Yeah.
so yeah, so yes, saves the back, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, for sure, for sure. So talking a bit about soil, I'm just explaining why I wanted to talk about this because I feel like I'm always saying, when I talk about people getting ready for their vegetable for their gardens in the spring or putting their gardens to, not that we really should be putting them to bed, but it's any kind of cleanup or anything you do in the fall. I'm always saying, now's the time to add top up with compost, even in the ornamental gardens, not even necessarily food related. Leave the leaves and top up with soil and top up with compost. And now's the time to do it. But I'm like, how much do we need to do? Like, when do we know if that's good, or can we overdo it? I know you've recently done a real deep dive on this with a soil scientist. And so I'm excited to watch. I've watched part of your series on YouTube. And so, yeah, so tell me kind of what your thoughts are and what you discovered in your interview.
I've had that exact same question even before I sat down with this agronomist to talk about my soil. You know, Charles Dowding, a very famous UK gardener, he has books and a YouTube channel and a lot of things. And he talks about the no dig gardening method,
Yes,
which is where
yes.
you create garden beds by just piling on compost. And he'll talk about the green waste compost. So that's like our municipal compost that is composted in facilities and then it can be sold back to people to use on their gardens. That's like pure compost. And he touts growing in that as the best possible way to garden. And I thought, like, that sounds like a great idea. His gardens are perfect and wonderful, and the plants all do great. But I was still just so curious about how that works because compost is not mineral soil, right? It's
Hmm.
missing, like, it's not necessarily sand, silt, and clay. I don't know what they
Right,
put in the composting facility, but like it's just organic matter.
right.
And so I wanted to dive deeper into this and find out, is that always going to be a good thing? Or is too much compost too much compost? And honestly, I had started asking around, like with soil suppliers, where I would buy my wholesale soils. I asked a soil scientist at the University of Guelph just randomly on one of his Facebook groups about gardening. And the feedback I was getting from these professionals was that no, you can have too much compost. Too much compost is
Mm.
not a good thing. And some of them would say never try to grow vegetables directly into compost. And others
Oh,
would be more pragmatic and say you can use compost, just don't use too much. And so when I sat down with this agronomist for my big long interview that I did, where I really got all the answers I've been looking for, his response was my favorite of all of them because there was no right or wrong. And that's the way
ah,
it is
that's
with
good.
gardening, right? There's
Yeah.
no definitives because every
Mm.
situation is different.
That's the thing, right? How you grow, where
Yeah.
you have versus and what we buy commercial compost versus what we're making
Yes.
versus I have a loamy, and looks good. It looks very different than what you buy anywhere else. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he talked about differences in salts, like the overall salts in compost. Compost tends to be high in salts, and there's a soil chemistry behind this that I don't fully understand, but it's
Okay.
not like it's not the salt that we eat. It's not that kind of salt. I mean, it could be as well, but it's salts that are created by the different nutrients in the different processes as they decompose. So it's too sciencey for me to explain properly, but I'll just say that compost tends to be higher in overall salts, and that can be hard on your plants. And so his recommendation was to just test your compost, or if you're purchasing compost, get a tested compost where it's got this nutrient profile.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
and I also create my own compost here on my homestead. And so
Mm.
it's a new composting system, and I plan to apply it for the first time in the spring. And I will be paying $20 to get a simple test done on that compost to find out its total salts and its general nutrients, just to know what I'm putting on my beds. And his recommendation at the end of the day was if you put on half an inch or like a centimeter of compost is probably sufficient as a top dressing
Oh,
on your
that's
beds.
not very much.
It's not
Okay.
very much, no.
Yeah.
And that's like a general blanket statement. Again,
Hmm.
reiterating that all gardens are different, every space is different. And
Hmm.
so if you're working with just like bare ground that has had no organic matter added, add a few inches, right? And then
Hmm.
you can decide if you want to work it in or not. If you could let the soil microbes bring it into the soil. There's so many different ways to do it and to apply compost.
Hmm.
But yeah, but there's no right or wrong. There's no just over the internet. I can't give a blanket statement of yes, add all the compost. It's always a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Or don't. You have to kind of do a test or use critical thinking skills, look at the compost you're working with and the soil that you're applying it to, and make some decisions around that.
Okay. Okay. So as far as the test goes, so I know there's one where we can get the kit ourselves. I've wrote about that in my book. I'm sure our
Mhm.
listeners, although I do you think I could find the page? Because I tested my vegetable garden at the time. So there's a little kit. I'm sure many people have seen it at the garden center, right? It's a plastic little in three different colors and stuff, and you can check out. I guess I should have found the page before we started this call. I'm like, okay, where's the? I know I did it in here somewhere, where we talk about it and about the soil testing. And I know mine was low in nitrogen. Yeah, here we go. Like I did do it, honest. um, do you think that's good enough? To me, that's like more of a soil than testing compost. Like, or is it the same thing?
Um, honestly, I used to use one of those and I've
Yes.
recommended using them, and I find that they aren't always reliable. Especially, I don't know if maybe the solutions that they give you, the liquid can't be frozen or what it is, but I've taken
Yeah.
it out of my shed and the next year the color's all murky, it doesn't really work. And
Oh, okay.
so I can't be 100% certain that those tests are gonna be valid or reliable. I'm sure
Right.
if you buy it fresh off the shelf, then that's your best time to use it.
Hmm.
And also things like nitrogen. What I learned recently from speaking with this agronomist is that it's actually quite difficult to understand how much nitrogen is available in your soil at any given time by using a test. Um,
Mm.
it, it off gases, it runs off, it changes readily in the soil. And so, even soil tests, they won't give you, like in a lab, they won't give you a specific value for nitrogen. They'll
Okay.
recommend applying nitrogen, and this is more like in an agricultural scale, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe turf grass. They'll recommend applying nitrogen based on like visual cues of what they're seeing in your plants. So they'll say, this
Oh.
looks like you could use more nitrogen. And then,
Oh,
yeah.
which could be actually more like that's actually probably might even be easier, really,
Mhm, mhm.
right? To say that. And that's kind of why I wanted this discussion because people are coming to me or sending me pictures of a plant that's struggling or that leaves are doing something unusual and I'm talking more ornamental plants like Japanese maples,
Uh,
garden phlox, the tall subulata. Um, and trying to figure out, okay, well, what is it, so yeah, so I think if I knew what, and I know it's from, I know some stuff, and salt is one of them, and chlorine, like plants around, like that chlorine rate, because I had that round, I learned that from an arborist about having plants, near a pool, and that the chlorine, does affect the air, like it raises and it does affect the plants nearby. We've
yeah.
since switched to a salt pool, but I don't know. I didn't really ask about that, right? How is that affecting things? So that's interesting that you said that about salt.
Hmm.
Um, and that is very good to know that that the tests, you can kind of get a guideline or just I think it might be good to do just to have the experience of knowing the difference, the different things, I guess, and knowing that those numbers aren't necessarily exact. But yeah, I could see that now, that so the one I saved from like 6 years ago I should probably toss that, right, and get a new one. But you can send away, right? It's not that
Yeah.
big of a deal, like you said, $20.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the price of those tests now in the store is probably comparable to sending it to a lab.
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about using a lab is most of them will give you a consultation when you get your results. So you can have a quick phone call with them and they can explain what you're seeing, which is really helpful. And you can get a $20 test, that's the basics, or you can get, I think a $60 test is the most exhaustive. It gives you everything you want to know. And most labs will also help you sort of cherry pick the tests that you need for what you're growing. So if you have ornamentals, if you have a lawn that you really care about, then they'll do specific tests for that.
Okay. And so I only know about the University of Guelph. They do it. Is there another
Mhm.
place that does the testing?
Yeah, there are a few labs that you might be able to just do an internet search for, but the one that I
Okay.
recommend is SGS.
SGS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're located in Guelph, but you can ship in your samples. So you can send a sample from anywhere.
Okay. All right. And that's funny you say that because I do have some people that are actually struggling. As much as I put in gardens and they're growing food and stuff, if they've got a little bit of lawn and they just can't make that work, it kind of makes them frustrated with all of it.
Yeah,
So I feel like caring about their lawn, I feel, but it's important, right? They still want that space and they still want it to look healthy. And it's true. If the lawn looks dead and everything else looks great, it doesn't matter. The yard doesn't look good.
yeah,
So yeah, I have one as specifically that I'm going to suggest that he's really struggled with the lawn and all my different suggestions have helped to a point and then back to square one. So yeah, so that is a good way for people to know that if you're very concerned about an aspect, but if the home is new to you, I think that is a good reason and then you're wanting to grow food, then I think that's a good thing to investigate. If it
yeah,
is a new build, right? We were talking a bit before the show. If it's a new build home, the builder's taken away all like good anything, right? And who knows
yeah,
what has come back in. So I
yeah,
feel like if you are planting in the ground and wanting to grow things in the ground, again, food's more because we're eating it, right? Is more important. But I think even ornamentals, because you want to be successful.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's two things that I want to say in response to what you shared there. One is that soil testing is a great preventative measure that you can take to save money and avoid like costly mistakes. So if you're
Yeah.
putting in a new garden, you don't want to spend. I hear that Japanese maples can be very expensive, right? If you get a
Hmm.
large one, you don't
Hmm.
want to spend hundreds of dollars on a plant to put in the ground and have it die. So it's a way to just preventatively figure things out. Also, doing a soil test can take out the guesswork and allow you to do a process of elimination to find out what actually is wrong with things. When I was growing my cauliflowers and broccolis this year, they just weren't working for me. There was something
Mm.
going on. They had hollow stems, and I was wondering, is this like a boron deficiency? Is it fungal? Are there insects? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And so the soil test allowed me to rule out a boron deficiency, to rule out that it was the soil lacking something. And then I was able to, through process of deduction, figure out what was most likely the cause. And so it's helpful in that regard as well, just process
Okay.
of elimination, so you can
Yes.
actually address the real problem.
Yeah.
And then also to that point, we talked about like developer soils, right? It's often compacted
Hmm.
and I just want to say that soil is part of the story, or the soil chemistry is part of the story. So you can
Mm.
get a soil test and that tells you soil chemistry, but we also have to look at things like compaction from
Yeah.
machinery going back and forth over a new development, organic matter, which is often stripped away, the topsoil being stripped away, soil biology that can't really exist if all of the organic matter is taken away. And also to consider things like what you're trying to grow. Like there's so many things to consider. And the
Hmm.
soil test or the soil chemistry is just one part of that bigger
Yeah.
picture, that bigger story.
No, that's great. That's great feedback. And you're right, because some people, like if we just look at the lawn situation, it's expensive to resod, like to strip your
Yeah.
sod and resod. And if you don't know, just because it's not, not performing, it's more cost effective to get that soil test to figure out what does that need.
Yeah.
Um, and when it comes to growing food, so uh, not everybody, and I think more and more people are moving to raised beds, right? They're much more, a little bit easier with critters, a little bit easier on our backs,
Yeah.
but that's also kind of a bit of a dilemma too, because now people are either building a frame, or buying. There's more. Things available to buy kind of like prefab.
Yeah.
I've been the most successful in my little vegetable space than ever, with a raised self-watering container,
Hmm.
but it is plastic. So that I have that question for you. And I grew lettuce and it never bolted. Like it was happy lettuce all
Yeah.
year. Even when I left it alone for 3 weeks, well, my kids look after it. We came home still to lettuce. So I'm like so excited for next year and considering investing in another one. But so when people are starting from nothing, that's kind of daunting to know that who knows what you're bringing in, right?
Yeah.
So what do you say? Any recommendations or thoughts?
Yeah. One of the things that I talk about often when I will give community speeches, presentations, things like that is the slow versus the fast in your garden. And so you can build amazing soil if you have a couple years. You can even do that in a raised bed. You can put a bunch of logs in the bottom and a bunch of leaves and then whatever topsoil you can find. And then you add compost or kitchen scraps. Like there's ways to just over many years build good soil. Most people don't have the patience for that,
Right.
especially if you've invested in a garden bed and you want to get something out of it right away. So then you're looking at buying soil. And luckily, there are great soils out there that you can use to fill a bed with. I recommend getting a triple mix, and I there's a brand that I really love that I always get. In fact, when I moved into my current property right now, it was 4 years ago, and we built the raised beds, and I paid for premium, like really good triple mix. And that year, first year that these gardens were in, guests would come to our space and say, "Whoa, you have a jungle. Like the vegetables are huge and like they look amazing." And I would have to say, I can take no credit for that. Like that is the
Oh, it's the
soil.
soil.
It is a
Oh, cool.
beautiful,
Well,
brand
the
new
weather
soil.
must have been good that year too, but yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Although there were a lot of complaints in my area. We had a lot of issues as well with the weather. It was that really cold, rainy summer, 2022, I think.
Okay.
And so the soil just it has to be a good quality soil to get good quality yield, especially when you're talking about vegetables.
Yes.
Vegetables, fruits, they require so much more nutrient because they're giving you so much more nutrient. We want to get those nutrients out of a big apple or a big juicy bell
Yeah,
pepper. Then, that plant is making dozens of those. It needs all of that from the soil.
exactly.
And so, yeah, there's recommendations I can give for great triple mix, a great soil to add.
Okay.
And then every year after that, we talked about compost. I do still recommend topping up with like maybe an inch, maybe less of
Mm-hmm.
compost. If you miss a year or two, it's probably not that big a deal, right? Like the soil will have life in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and mulching, I'm a big fan of mulching, even raised beds. So adding
Okay.
fall leaves, adding straw. When you weed things, just lay the weeds down on top of
Yeah,
the
I was
soil.
just gonna say that because what's the cut or even like, the vegetables, like you just cut, you leave the roots in, right? And not,
Yeah.
what is that called? Chop and drop kind of thing?
Yeah,
There's all
yeah,
those
yeah.
different,
Chop and drop is like chopping leaving the weed there on
yes.
top. And then the roots can break down and add structure.
Hmm.
So those are all ways that you can get excellent quality soil in a raised bed.
Okay.
And it's fast and it's very little maintenance year after year.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know where the whole sterile, like we need to clean everything up. Like I don't know when that was, right? And we really are having
Yeah.
a hard time getting
Yeah. I mean,
people,
there's,
whether it's vegetable or even ornamental, right? Like,
yeah,
we don't, yeah. So if people are, I don't know what they are, but anyway, so
there's,
that
there's
trend.
potentially a reason in like disease management.
Mhm.
Where you want to remove overwintering pests from the plant debris, remove like fungal spores that could come back the next year.
Yeah.
But what I'm learning is that if you leave those things, nature will correct itself. It's
Mm,
just you don't see it right away. You get a
mm,
nice balanced ecosystem, but it takes years. And then once you start removing those things, you're starting back at square one, really. And you have to
right.
spend those years letting nature repair itself so that it has the checks and balances.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I think a lot of that is, as much as people are moving towards growing food and wanting to do that type of thing, we still kind of want instant, right? Like, I mean, I'm guilty of that too. And I even have to prepare, when I put in a garden, that's my biggest struggle of designing a garden for like an ornamental garden for people is that, you know, the initial garden doesn't look like much, right? There's lots of space.
Yeah.
There's not, and so they've spent all this money and it doesn't look like much, but I know what it's going to look like in 3 years, or I can make them super happy with the instant install. Like it looks amazing right from day one, but in 3 years, they're absolutely going to hate me, right? Because
Yeah.
everything, so
Yeah.
it's that. So I'm always, when the plants get delivered, I always have that conversation with them or on the drawing, like these symbols are 3-year growth, like when they won't
Mhm.
be touching it, when you get them. So So because I think people do when they get keen on something, they want it instant. And live living things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Needs time. Yeah. So what is your favorite thing to grow? Hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's tough. I
Okay.
think tomatoes,
Oh,
because you
okay.
just can't get the variety at the
Mhm.
grocery store. You just you get boring old shipment tomatoes.
Yes.
And so all the different varieties. I only have space for about 15 tomato plants, and usually those are all different varieties. I'll have
Oh, good
15
for you.
different
Yeah,
kinds.
different things.
Just because I love that variety. They all taste different, they have a different texture, they look different.
Yes.
We also live in a fairly good climate for tomatoes here. In more humid spaces, it's really difficult to grow tomatoes because of the fungal issues that get them. Here, we can grow a tomato basically from May until the first frost.
Okay.
And unless there's a really bad case of late blight that sweeps through an area, then usually the tomatoes will survive and thrive and keep
Yeah.
producing until frost.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I threw a curveball to you there. Sorry, just circle back to the buying the soil or compost
Mhm.
for new gardens. I do like I love you said you got a shipment from someone, so you've researched a good quality compost. So I think that's very important for us to say. I'm less comfortable with the bagged stuff where we don't necessarily I'm seeing people put a lot of those bags in their carts. I'm not seeing them read about where that stuff is coming from and how long, and we don't know how long it's been in the bag, hot heat hot, like we just don't know. And that goes for me for from compost to mulch even. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it is better to get source it from someone who's going to then deliver it in bulk, as opposed to that. Now, if you have a really small, in a few containers, then okay. Um, but yeah, do you agree?
Yeah, and most places will deliver as little as a yard.
Yes.
And I mean, that's enough to fill a raised bed, more or less, depends what you put in it and how big it is. But
Yeah.
there's usually a way to use up soil.
Yeah.
So if I have leftovers, I put it in pots, I put it in a
Yes.
big bag and let it sit, or a bin. And then every time I need to fill a little pot or top something up, it's there. So I never have enough soil as a
Mm.
gardener.
Yeah.
If you have perennials that you want to divide and sell or give away to your community, then you need a little extra soil to
Soil.
pot those
Yes.
up in.
Yes.
So I can never have enough, which is why I buy bulk. But I also agree, you never know what's in those bags of purchased soils from the box stores.
Hmm.
We don't necessarily know where they're made, and just the plastic, there's just excess
Yeah.
plastic in those. And I
Yeah.
have definitely purchased, sheep manure or whatever in those bags before, and
Yeah.
there'll be strings of plastic inside it, and
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like great quality to the naked eye.
Yes.
And you don't
Yeah.
have a nutrient profile or nutrient analysis on those all the time, whereas bulk suppliers will do nutrient tests. And
Yeah.
so you don't even have to pay for that to send it away. You just ask them and they can email you a copy of their nutrient tests.
Yeah. And I worry about the municipal. I'm also not a huge, I wouldn't say fan, but I'm leery of the municipal compost. Like you said, they take it and they sell it back to us, or they have free giveaways and stuff. And I know in my community, everybody looks like goes crazy for that. And things like, so my concern is there, one, I don't know, like, how hot do they get it? Like, what do, but I think of, because everybody I say this to, just something as simple as dog strangling vine. And I say, everybody I talk to, don't, they know to pull it out. If they know that it's a weed and how aggressive it is, they know to pull it out, but they're putting it in their brown paper bags
Yeah.
and they're with their yard waste, and they're not putting it in the, and so I'm always saying, nope, it goes in the garbage. It's Roundup, like you can't go. So I just worry that if there's lots of, I'm not talk to everybody, right? Like everybody, people don't know, and they're thinking they're doing a good thing by removing it, but they don't know that it shouldn't go in and there's other weeds, I'm sure the same, right? So are those municipal um composting facilities really yeah, getting it hot enough to kill that, and then is there really any nutrition left anyway?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm
Yeah.
curious as well.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my one big thing. So I'm like, I'm always leery of those free giveaways of compost. But so yeah, so that is interesting. So what other things did you discover with your conversation and your little soil? And Amy's got this all on YouTube. She had an excellent YouTube channel with she's got fancy like music and slow motion. So don't compare her to my podcast shows. They're just really good. But yes, but I'm sure he had a lot since it was 3 parts. I'm sure you covered a lot, right?
Yeah, so much. And honestly, I could have kept talking for
Yeah.
hours with him because I love this stuff. One of the messages that really hit me was about pH.
Oh,
And
okay.
as somebody who has been aware of pH in my soil and also pH in like aquariums, we've had aquariums in my family. And so I was aware of what pH is. It's the acidity or the alkalinity, the softness or the hardness, like it's related, of your soil. And so the things like blueberries and azaleas we think of as needing a low pH soil or an acidic soil. And then things like very little likes really alkaline, but like lavender will like an alkaline soil or high pH soil. That was really the extent of my understanding of pH. But I learned recently that it really affects the uptake of nutrients. And so if you have really low pH, phosphorus can get locked up in the soil, so your plants can't absorb it. And if you have a really high pH, which is what we have in a lot of Ontario, especially around where I am in Guelph, really high pH, things like iron, manganese, and zinc get tied up and your plant can't absorb them. So you
Mm,
might do a soil test and see that you're really low in a
iron or
certain
something.
nutrient and add a bunch of amendments. But actually, if your pH isn't adjusted accordingly, then it's not really going to help because your plant can't absorb enough of it.
Oh,
So pH just has it has it impacts a lot of these things, a lot of the
okay.
different nutrient uptakes in plants.
But it's not something that's easily moved.
Apparently, you can raise pH fairly easily. It's not a problem
Okay.
I've ever had being in a place with a lot of
Right.
calcium in the soil and really high pH. You can raise it with lime. So there's a certain calculation that you can do to tell you how much lime to add, and you can broadcast it and it'll raise your pH, and that works fairly well. But lowering pH, which is the problem I've always struggled with to be able to grow blueberries, um, the pH of the soil or the soil wants to revert back to its natural status. And so you have to continually we add elemental sulfur to soils to try to lower that pH. But then you need to be doing a test every season and apply every season. And it's just a lot of work to try to keep that soil a lower pH.
Right.
I've almost given up on blueberries because of it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, and that is a common and azaleas. And it's funny because I planted some azaleas this year, so I'm going to get to see how well they do in my soil. Um, and it is so for listeners who whether it is food or ornamental, I mean, there's still a good reason to know about your soil, right? In the scope of what you do at home for your family, you also help others. So would you want to tell us a little bit about that? Your consultations?
Yeah. So the Hobby Homestead is actually a small business. I do YouTube content creation and I also do garden design work for people. It's specifically homestead design. So if you want to grow food for your family, yeah, I can help with things like backyard chickens and things like that too, getting the whole
Do you have
infrastructure set
chickens?
up.
You have
Yes,
oh, you do
yes.
have chickens. Excellent. So
Yeah.
you live in you might live in the suburbs, but you live in a suburb that lets you have chickens.
Yes, there are a few precious cities that allow it. And yeah, so that kind of infrastructure is the kind of thing I help people design. I come out to your property. I also offer virtual consultations. So if I'm not within driving distance, I can do it virtually. I like to see the space. I like to see your shade canopy and because we're talking suburbs, it's also important to know what your neighbors are doing, what the fences are like, and what your ground, your soil is like, just visually. Is it compacted? Has it been lawn for decades and decades? That kind of thing. And I talk to people about their interest in food. homegrown food, what they
Mhm.
plan to do with it, their favorite kinds of food to eat and cook with, and whether or not that can be grown at their space.
Right.
We talk about whether or not they see themselves as regular weeders and waterers, or whether they
Hmm.
need something more hands-off. With
Hmm.
food, there's still options. You can have perennial food systems that are more hands-off, like your ornamental garden.
Right.
Uh, we talk about things like canning, and are you willing to get into preserving? Because if you want two apple trees, you're going to need a solution to use all those apples in five to
Right.
10 years.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of design work that I do. It's a bit of a garden layout, but more than that, it's like your systems design.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great. Yeah, and I could see us like we have to keep in touch and work together because it is most gardens. And I was saying this again before the show. When I first started, um, designing and going to people's backyards, I was just doing it, part time with a local garden center. And people were moved into a new house and they wanted a garden design, and they wanted me to remove the vegetable garden and remove the fruit trees, and they wanted something else, right? Something, and then now I'm finding it's the opposite. People are asking what fruit trees can they grow and where should they put the vegetable garden, or can they raise gardens and things like that. So I just love it. I love that it's changing, the ebb and flow of things. And I think with the costs of our food as well as the quality of our food, I think it's not becoming just it's not just because it's a hobby. I think it's becoming a necessity for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely possible to get resilience and food security from a home garden. But there's a caveat that it also takes a bit of an upfront investment. So, you can't start with absolutely nothing, put a few seed potatoes in your lawn, and then expect to get a bountiful reward. So, there is some upfront investment, whether that's monetary or time, or maybe
Right.
both.
Right.
But then it's totally possible to have that high return, even in a suburban backyard, even on a balcony. Like food plants want to grow, seeds want to
Mhm.
grow. They want to produce more seeds, which in terms of things like tomatoes and cucumbers, that means producing fruit. So like you don't have to do much as the gardener to get yields out of fruit, vegetables. You just have to provide the groundwork. And so a little bit
Yes.
of infrastructure up front, some good soil, some sunlight, some water, and
Yeah.
you can get that return.
Yeah. And I think that's good for people to know that you don't necessarily need acres either, right? That's the whole premise is, you've got a good size yard, but I saw the videos, you still have a big lawn still for the kids to, and the play structure and stuff. So, and that you can grow a lot in containers. So our backyard is all pool and interlock, and it was that way when we moved in. So we have tried in little, like mostly containers. I've been the most successful. We do have a strip, that 18 inches between the, concrete and the fence.
Yeah.
And I've told the story before of our listeners that my son was 19 at the time, and it was ornamental grasses and river rock, basically what could you plant to not interfere with the pool. And he just said, Mom, can we take all that out and put in, can I grow vegetables? And I was like, what? And sure. But I said, but we dumped the river rock in by wheelbarrow. I said to take it out, like now you're taking it out one at a time. And he did. He removed it all. And we were creative. I feel like we hung chains from the fence so that cucumbers could grow on chains, and we, were successful with some things, but there wasn't like I can't keep, because of the way the backyard was built, I can't keep the soil in that spot. Like it runs off behind to the neighbor.
Wow.
So it was very challenging. And so I've kind of slowly, and we were also doing it in containers, and almost some things were, it was interesting how this tomato plant did in the soil versus this tomato plant did in a big container, right? So we have the space for containers, and I think it's a good compromise. It's made me choose things like more determinate tomatoes versus indeterminate tomatoes.
Mhm.
And so I'm learning with my clients, and I'm learning as I go. And I love following people like you that that show the best way to do it. So you're never done, right?
Never. And one year you may think like I'm really good at growing tomatoes. This
Yeah.
is this is what grows well in my yard. And then the very next year, you say, I can't grow tomatoes here, but
Yeah.
I think I'm really good at growing kale. Like it
Yeah.
just changes year after year, and it's not you.
Yeah.
It's so many other conditions.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited about lettuce. And my husband was too. Oh my gosh. He was out like he just loved it. And he's never really paid attention to it before, but he was so impressed that he could just go to the backyard and grab lettuce for the salad that night and stuff. So I think that was so, but you're right, because you don't know what the season's going to bring. And peppers like heat. If it's not a hot summer, it's whatever. So yeah, that is the challenge, right? Things change. um have you also, I know there's also a thing about moving rotating crops, so to so
Mhm.
that's something that's important too, right? Not planting the same is that still a thing, or
It is and it isn't. It's
okay.
important on large scale agriculture,
Mm,
where you don't want to plant the same thing in however many, like 100 acres here as you planted last year. And that's mostly the nutrient availability in the soil. And so if you have something that's a really hungry feeder like corn, this is the typical agricultural rotation, right?
right.
Then it's recommended to rotate it with soybeans the next year so it can fix some nitrogen soil. Like it's a strategic rotation like that. And in home gardens, when you're talking about vegetables and probably some ornamentals as well, we would rotate for disease, not resistance, but to try to escape or get ahead of the
Right. Yeah.
diseases
Okay.
as much as nutrients. But with
Right.
vegetable gardens, like you're adding nutrients, so that's
Hmm.
less of a concern.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I did this research recently, and I can't remember if it's 70% or even higher of pathogens are airborne. And so, in a garden space like somebody's backyard, it doesn't matter if you plant your tomatoes here this year and in this bed the next year, because those pathogens just float between them. So,
Ah.
it's a small percentage of pathogens that are in the soil or soil borne, and they'll stay there. There was one, it's called Alternaria chloride. It was attacking my tomato plants, and it apparently is soil borne and should stay there. So I did rotate my tomatoes this
Okay.
past year because of that. But it's as with everything, there's no one size fits all. Once you get it
Right. Right.
there,
Yeah.
it's probably less important than all the hype would lead you
Yes,
to think.
about it. Which is good because things like raised beds and containers, it's harder. Like, yes, you can dump out the soil, right? Which is what I tend for containers. But I've been wondering about that with my raised bed, like what do I take all this soil out? What do I add back in? Um,
Yeah, if you can strike a balance in the ecosystem, so you've got pests and you've got their predators, and a balance with the soil microbes, feeding them a balanced diet, then it should take care of itself and you shouldn't have to worry about rotating things.
okay. Now, what about, so we talked about soil and compost. Do you ever add anything else, like any other type of quote unquote fertilizer, whether it's water soluble, whether it's a pellet type thing? Do you see a need for, and that's also in my mind about soil testing, like why are we adding these things if we don't know we need it, or,
Yes.
right?
Yes, good point. It's expensive to buy
Yeah.
amendment fertilizers. I don't add any amendments or fertilizers beyond just the organic matter, the compost or the mulch or whatever it is to my beds. However, if I'm growing a vegetable in a pot, like this year, I planted 15 beet seeds in an 18 by 18-inch pot. Ended up getting 28 beets out of it because those seeds have multiple seeds within them. They're like a
Right.
compound, I can't remember what they're called. So with that, because it was crammed in there, I watered that pot twice with a fish emulsion, like a
Okay.
balanced organic fertilizer, um, just to feed them a little bit extra. But that's
Okay.
that's really it. When I'm really pushing the limits of what a
Yeah.
container can give me, then I'll feed it.
Yeah.
But with my raised beds, there's enough space there that means there's enough soil life, which means it can break down all the organic matter and like it's a good system.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the fish emulsion's a good, you know, more of an organic fertilizer, right?
Mhm.
Hmm. So that's good to know. So an 18 by 18, how tall was the pot?
18. It was
Oh,
just a
oh, sorry.
cube.
So 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I'm thinking, okay. So I was thinking square, but yeah, square. Okay. Wow. That's a lot of beets. See, and I never would have thought of growing root vegetables in containers. So that you just went poof there because yeah, when my husband and I started really enjoying beets, and I'm thinking, those definitely need to be in the ground, but not necessarily.
Not necessarily, just keep it well watered and yes, I
Yes.
would feed if you're cramming things in.
Yes, yes, that is a good thing. And
Yeah.
so are you now with that soil? So did you dump that soil out or what did you?
It's recommended to dump out your soil when you're growing vegetables in pots, but I almost never do because I'm really cheap. I just top it up.
Right.
So usually I'll top it up with compost
Okay.
because it's already like it's a potting soil in that pot.
Okay, that was
Um,
my next question was did you start with more of a potting soil because just
yeah,
garden soil is very heavy for a pot, right?
Yeah, I have when I've had leftover triple mix from my bulk deliveries, I will use that, but I'll mix in perlite
Okay.
as a seed starter. I also always have big bags of perlite on hand or
Yes.
vermiculite. So I'll mix that in just to aerate it because with anything in a pot, but especially vegetables, you need drainage and you need aeration. But yeah, you can reuse your soil. Just make sure you are amending that soil because in a pot it does get depleted.
Okay. Good. That is great, great information. Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to make sure we cover before? And I definitely want to have you back on because I think there's lots to talk about, especially in the
Yes.
what quote unquote off season. So I'm sure
Yeah,
you're getting ready for next, winding this year, but thinking ahead to next year, uh,
absolutely.
kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and people can check you. We'll have all your information on our show notes, so they can certainly follow your YouTube channel. But if they are local to you, consultation for
Mhm.
their homestead, if they want to grow vegetables and be more successful, then
Yeah.
it's always good to get help. I like with a landscape designer, right? Like you are saving money. The investment is honestly you're saving money because you're not making all the mistakes,
Yeah. Saving money,
right?
saving time. Yeah.
Saving time, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with food, if you miss the window, like, right? So even more so.
Yeah. Or you put in
Yeah,
something like asparagus or fruit trees and you wait years to find out that it actually didn't work there. It's heartbreaking.
absolutely. Or yeah, that you did something wrong, that type of thing. So, and I love your mantra, growing food in harmony with nature. And then we didn't even talk about the hundreds of native plants that you have growing. So yeah, so there's definitely, I hope you're enjoying it because I think there's lots for us to talk about and my listeners will
Absolutely.
enjoy. But I think it's really good to talk about soil and for people to consider probably a professional test and also if they don't want to test then know that you're buying quality soil, that it really does matter. Quality soil and quality compost does matter,
Hmm.
and for the success of your plants. And when food, I don't think we want to mess around, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
right.
yeah, so is there anything, I asked you that question and then I kept talking, sorry.
Um, yeah, I guess a take-home message would be
Mhm.
shifting your mindset as a gardener from feeding the plants to feeding the soil. You need to feed the soil so that it has everything it needs to then feed the plants. Feeding plants is almost like a band-aid.
Ah, yes, okay, so that's the takeaway, feed the soil. Excellent. Do you think so? Let's end on this other question. So, if people are done and they put their backyard, do you think that's okay? And then they can start, making changes in the spring, or given the time of year, like I think it's still time to do something if you want to, right?
Yeah. Are you talking about a soil test or design?
Yeah, soil test or
Yeah.
design too, right?
Yeah. This is the time. This is the
Yes,
best time, right? This is
absolutely.
the cusp of the gardener's new year. And
Yeah,
so, great time to do a soil test. Most places around us right now is not frozen solid yet. So you can still
right.
go out and scoop some soil and send it in for a test. And then you can start the wheels turning, thinking, what am I
Mm,
going to adjust next year, if anything? Also, the best time to plan.
yep.
Especially when the garden's looking a bit naked and skeletal, it's easier to see what you have and what you might add. And
Yes.
it's an exciting time to plan.
Yes. Yes, because why grow all those seeds all winter to only discover they don't they don't work
They
for your
don't care
space,
anywhere. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Or buy the plants even, whether you're
Yes.
starting from seed or you're buying plants already. Again, it really does make sense to start. My motto is, with down to earth landscape design, great landscapes start with a plan. And I think
Mhm.
food gardens also benefit from that, right? It really is
Absolutely.
important to start with a plan. And I think starting to talk to someone who's done it, who's experienced, who's done it in a slightly larger scale than most, right? And you have, because you also said you grew up around food and growing food with your family. So I think, there's no reason not to call you.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today down the garden path. I loved meeting you, and I loved our conversation. I really do hope we can do it again.
Yeah, I would love
And
that.
I know that our many listeners will enjoy it. And so yeah, so thank you. And thank you everybody for listening. And I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did our chat. And thank you for joining me once again down the garden path.